And it's unique to this game, right? Like there's only one of those decks. Just one of the most exciting parts about the game, and one about the most fun parts when engaging the secondary market, I think.
Hello and welcome to the Forgeborn Finishing School. Casey, Kid, and Core here. We'll be analyzing Forgeborn battles to help take your game to the next level. Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode here, Forgeborn Finishing School. We have some exciting news, but before we jump into that, I do want to talk about FuseFest really quickly, and then the open beta. So, FuseFest is just around the corner. It is going to be taking place in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it is on the 27th of April. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, you can jump in. There's going to be a description or a link down in the video description below. It's $60 US, and I think that gets you into at least 2 events. So you're probably going to get, at a minimum, 2 boosters. We don't have an extreme amount of details, but we have enough. If you look in the event in that description, you can see that on Saturday, there's going to be an event with prizes awarded to the top 8 finishers, and then that night is a storyline event also, which is going to be a ton of fun. We're all going to be playing with brand new decks, brand new set. So make sure you brush up on your spoilers. A lot of the content creators were releasing spoilers actually after Gen Con last year with a lot of cool card details, and then there's an entire channel in the Stoneblade Discord that has a lot of breakdowns of all the cards that were spoiled. So do your homework or not and show up and just have fun, a little bit of a surprise. That's kind of an entertaining part of it as well. And then Sunday, the conference hall is going to open up again, and they're going to kind of run what looks like sealed draft pods on demand. So as soon as 8 players show up, want to play, it looks like they're just going to make a pod and let that run for a while. It looks, I think 3 hours or so, and then at 1 p.m. there's going to be a constructed event with more prizes. So Sunday looks like it's action-packed as well, which is some new details we received recently, so pretty excited for that. Greg, I think you're going to be coming up. We have quite a few people coming up, so 35 players signed up at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun to get up there and just, again, meet with the community in person. It's going to be a fun time.
And then also, just recently, we went into open beta. So we've been, we went through alpha, we went through closed beta, which was all the Kickstarter backers, and now open beta has released. Stoneblade has said it's going to be a $20 purchase of the game, but there is a limited time $15 purchase. So tell your friends and family if you can get into the game now, they're going to save $5 and get access to those starter decks. And also, very cool, we just learned, they just released in the latest update that your player experience is going to provide you a battle pass-like experience that allows you to unlock decks. Greg, I've already looked through a couple of my decks. I got myself a Uteran Betrayer Necromancer, which
Nice.
Looks like it could be fun to play. So I'm excited to get that on the digital tabletop and upgrade some cards. And they did just fix the bug that allows you to upgrade and play a card in Cycle 3. So Army Commander's fixed, Drone's fixed. It's going to be a fun time.
Excellent. Yeah, looking forward to it. I did unlock my 6 decks, I think it gives you in total, and then the last one is a Prismatic Trail card effect. So I got a Utero deck that could be interesting to play. It has a Krogus in it, some life gain in it, could be interesting. But today's episode, as viewers can see, we are joined today by Aaron, aka Scuba Toad, on the Discord, who runs the Gray Viking games. Kind of the secondary market basically is really one driving the secondary market. Is the best opportunity for us to get decks. I think I purchased 5 or 6 decks the last go around. So Aaron, welcome to the channel, and please tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you've set up for the community.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be on. Always happy to talk Solforge. Yeah, we run we've been running the sales for, I don't know, better part of, I think actually a little over a year now since we first started running them. And so, yeah, many of you in the community have participated, but yeah, we just run a bunch of single priced sales where you can pick a deck out of a few thousand decks, purchase them, and get them shipped out. So it's been a lot of fun. We've been running them once a month or so, and both these guys have participated and decided to have me on today.
Yeah, we're looking to thin down our collection, and it's a pretty daunting task. When I have a lot of decks, right? I've procured a lot, and so we wanted to reach out to you, kind of an expert in the field here. I'm not kind of you really are. Like you've implemented a pretty amazing piece of technology that has allowed to somewhat quickly analyze a whole slew of decks to give a very great point of reference um, on those. So, with that said, we got some questions for you here in a little bit, but for um, those tuning in, like I said, me and Ryan are looking to sell some of our collections. We're looking to post that on April 19th, starting at 6 p.m. There'll be more details following out here later as well, and then closing on the 24th of April at 6 p.m. And we wanted to do this before FuseFest, so anybody that's going to FuseFest will be able to just bring those decks to FuseFest. You don't have to pay for the shipping charge if you're going to pick them up there. And then we're also going to have plenty of accessories that we've collected over the time. We're not getting out of the game. We have a lot to go through, and we have plenty of decks to play. And so we're just looking to provide those to people that may want to play them more. Right, we have a lot of new players coming in, and this will be an easy way for them to access a slew of decks, much like what you're doing here. Ryan, your thoughts or questions for Aaron?
Yeah, no, what I was just thinking about is Aaron said about a year ago, and it's like, man, I remember seeing the first Great Vikings game come out, and it was mind blowing to the community at the time, because we were literally all just surfing eBay for the random collections that would come online, and it would be like a lot of 8 decks, and you would just get this weird, random out of scope picture with a little piece of cardboard over the QR code. You had to like download the image, zoom in, try to enhance it to like read the deck list. It was so difficult to try to acquire decks. And then Great Vikings game. What seeming to me out of nowhere was dropped in Discord. We're going to sell decks. We're going to use the collection manager, and which is the tool that all of you players use. Absolutely amazing. We're able to filter, search, and find exactly what we're looking for. And Aaron, you mentioned that we've both bought decks on there. Absolute highlight, and there is a reason why I love secondary marks. Absolute highlight for me is I spent a lot of time looking for a 5 dinosaur Tempest deck with the Tempest Rex. I would go to events, I would talk to people, try to find one. I always had it on my radar. I bought plenty of boosters, never found what I thought was kind of the holy grail of what I was looking for in dino decks. And lo and behold, I've searched all of your sales, and one popped up, bought it. It's been one of my funnest decks to play ever since. So that's what the secondary market kind of allows you to do. Like you said it, that you've opened 1,000 decks, and every player gets to go through and find the 1, 2, 3 decks they're looking for that fits their playstyle, fits their intent. So really, really amazing opportunity. But kind of leading into that, Aaron, I wanted to ask you, like, so you've been selling cards in Solforge Fusion for about a year now. Did you get into Solforge Fusion with the intent to kind of set up a secondary market as a business venture? Or did you start playing, and then how did one lead to the other?
Yeah, so I did not get into Solforge Fusion to sell cards and make money. That was not the intent. I did play the original Solforge. I did kickstart the initial Kickstarter for the physical game. I went to Gen Con. I played in the release event, played in the storyline event, or a couple sealed events there. Had a ton of fun. It really just spoke to me as I played Magic kind of like pseudo professionally, was a grinder on Magic Online, only draft, didn't have a collection, played a lot of Keyforge, played also at the Keyforge release back in 2017, played competitively there in, I forget what they called their competitive events, but when I saw Solforge, I knew it was a game I was going to like. I love limited events. I love unique deck games that force you to play with these unique constraints on decks. So basically picked up the game, loved it, had about 8 to 10 people locally I was playing with. And on the flip side, Great Viking Games has always been in Magic. We have bought and sold a ton of Magic cards. We have a website where we sell Magic codes, which is the main brand if you go out and see it. We also run a couple other websites out there selling other various games. And so really, we've had access to distribution pricing. We have a group of a team that could do the logistics of, in receiving product, opening product, selling product. And so I think, I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was at some point I saw that a deck sold on eBay for like 180 bucks. I think it was like a double rallying deck with like a Drix and something else. And I was like, maybe there is an actual market for this game and there's enough demand to drive something up to there. I don't know if it was one of you guys that bought it or what, but I remember seeing it on eBay early on. And we had been selling Keyforge on eBay back in the day, and it was difficult. We used the decks of Keyforge to kind of like evaluate the decks, and then we'd post that and price them on eBay, and we sold a few hundred decks on there, but had gotten pretty good at evaluating these like unique deck type games. And so quickly realized here the experience was really poor. Everybody was on eBay, like you said. Nobody could find the decks they were looking for. It's really hard to filter for what you wanted, a specific betrayer or card set. And so I was like, look, I also do pricing in my professional life. So I just thought, I can do this. I can price these decks and just see if there's a market for this. And I think our first sale, we sold about 50 decks. I think it was around maybe like $800 or something. And I thought, man, I had fun doing it. The community seemed to appreciate it. And then that was really the origin.
Nice. Yeah, on that double rallying, it was not either of us, but I'll leave something for the viewers out there. It is a content creator for Solforge Fusion who purchased that deck. But it was a very fun deck. I got to play it against it in the Ultimate Championship Indiana. So there's the crumbs you can go easily find who has the deck now.
I believe I played it twice.
But yeah, so we kind of already talked about the content manager or the collection manager, sorry, about how amazing that is. I just have to say how inspirational that was, like that you just saw this tool and you said, hey, we can use it. And it's the way that players have learned to ingest their decks, like analytically. It's the resource we use. And so you tied into that. And that was honestly like probably the thing that made it stand out the absolute most is you met the customers on the medium of what is the vocal choice, which is Discord community. And then you used the resource that we use to analyze the decks, right? And then obviously I want to throw this out there is that when you started these sales, you right off the bat you said we're going to use the collection manager, and oh by the way, like we're not going to just use someone else's tool that they made for free. We're going to give them a little bit of a kickback to like incentivize them and say thank you for creating the tool for the community. So Aaron, I just want to throw kudos out to that. That's something that most people wouldn't do, right?
Yeah, it at the time it didn't feel good. I mean, especially if you go in and look at the code. I haven't talked to the two creators that I've worked with as far as how much time they put into it, but I've looked at some of the Google script that they've written and whatnot, and a lot of the API calls, and I've actually messed around with some of the API calls with Stoneblade and haven't found a great way to they don't have a lot documented, and so they figured out a lot on their own, and so it was clear they'd put a lot of time into it, and I was benefiting from it. So at the time it felt, hey, look, it didn't feel right that I was going to use this tool and this tool was facilitating this ease, that they had created, right? So I wanted to make sure that they saw some benefit there. Also, I benefited if they kept it up to date and made sure it worked. I benefited from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's still, that's not something everyone would necessarily do. So obviously, I'll thank you for the community, but it's very awesome. So. And then, how long did it take? So you started out as a player, like you played the original Solforge game. Obviously, you backed the Kickstarter. You told us, played at Gen Con, the original Gen Con, which is awesome. Like when the thought came to your mind, and this is probably a simple question, but when the thought came into your mind to like inception, Now that we know you kind of already have a business for other games, what was the time frame that it looked like to just kind of introduce Solforge Fusion into your already standard practices, make the changes required for Solforge Fusion, and then start going?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a funny story. I was on a trip down to Sun River, Oregon, and with a couple guys, and we decided to bring, I think, a case of Solforge Fusion and do a draft where we played a game. Whoever lost, we did a snake draft with the kit, right? And so, anyways, we played there at that event, and it was that night I looked and saw a couple decks are selling on eBay, and I was like, man, I kind of want to buy some decks. I started bidding on eBay myself, and it just kind of, and I think at the time we also went out and there was a couple places discounting Solforge Fusion, the alpha set, because I think there was a lot printed and the demand wasn't as strong as I think it was originally intended to be, right? And so a lot of places were stuck with product and couldn't move through it, including distribution, but also on the secondary market. The secondary market was actually selling, at the time for less than what we could buy through our distribution partners. And so it was like, hey, if we, I can't remember where we picked it up from, but hey, if we pick it up here, we can actually get pretty decent rates on the decks themselves. And if we can sell a handful, at what this double rallying deck just sold for, then maybe there is enough to make it worth it and some profit left, right? And so that was really the origin. I think that day at that trip, we ordered, I don't know, maybe like our first 500 decks, which we opened in March of 2023. And that was the first sale.
Nice. Just talking about that sale. So like, and that's a kind of a good point. Like you just bought 500 decks, and at that point that's potentially manageable by a person perusing through the decks and assigning values. It's still a very daunting task, but it's possible. Right. At some point you scaled beyond that, and then you've created this pricing program that Greg and I got to see in action. Like Greg kind of mentioned, see it generate through our decks and propose a price with some additional other information. So can you just kind of explain like how it rates the decks, how, not necessarily all the details and how you created it, but what is it doing behind the scenes for you to kind of get you that end product that we all see when we log into Discord, open up your sheet, and we just get to see thousands of decks with prices and, end product.
I think it was around maybe the 1,500 deck point, because every time we did a sale, we sold through it, and then we added a few hundred more. We ordered more, opened them, put them on, and eventually I was like, man, manually pricing these is so difficult. I was just going through Collection Manager, building a couple formulas in Excel that I could look for combinations, etc. Sorry, excuse me. And eventually I was like, I can't do this. There's too many decks, and it's impossible to look for things like double rallying, double vampiric, double shambling. At least for me, I wasn't smart enough to figure out how in Excel to grab those out of the, the deck link. So from there, I basically went out and said, hey, I need to find a way to do this at scale. And so I went to school a long time ago for coding, C#. So I just quickly dusted off my old skill set, was able to kind of just like go out, import the decks, run through them individually, and basically use all the stuff I had built my Excel formulas for. I had been keeping a list of what was selling, what wasn't selling, what people were looking for, what was doing well at tournaments. And so I put it into three buckets. I said, hey, for a deck to have a good price, it has to either have a competitive archetype, it has to have or just a unique combo potential, and then the third one was just general card score, which is just like I'm going to rate every single individual card modifier. And so those three pieces, the program runs through, evaluates it, says, hey, here's what's in this deck. Here's these three components, you add them together. There's a little bit of other, nuance to that. And then it puts it into the score and pushes it. And then actually when I shared it with you guys was the first time I'd actually had it also spit out the reasons as to why the pricing. So you guys actually got the first take of, hey, here's the reasons. that this was priced the way that it was. So that was the first time I actually got to share that, and I think was probably a easier experience to understand why the decks were priced the way they were.
Yeah, we kind of looked at that and used that information. It was really helpful, like looking at like, okay, so this has this and these have these synergies. It was really impactful, like looking at how it was doing it and pricing it. And so when we started like looking into it, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll compare different decks and like seeing like, okay, well, this is priced at here with this, and then what are our thoughts on that, and how can we, what are our expectations of selling that deck, which can be a little bit different, right? Everybody's going to have a different expectations of what they value on a deck. So we kind of went through there and I didn't know if we could compare like two decks pricing to understand the logic a little bit better and take a look at it. Like, so for instance, RSC is kind of the big topic. We did an episode on it yesterday or last week. And so we know this is something that's in the community. We have some RSC decks available as well. And so we have the Captains of Wagering, which I believe you're valued at 85. And then we also have the Averse of, the Party of Averse Study, which is valued at 75. So there's only a $10 difference on that. So kind of what are some of your thoughts, or how the algorithm or the script program is built that looks at these two decks? Because they're very similar decks with only a $10 difference.
Yeah. So like in that scenario, looking at those two decks, they're actually really interesting because they share 6 of the exact same cards, right? And so there's 4 cards that are different, and then obviously there's Forgeborn abilities that are different as well. And on this one specifically, right, there's no combo potential here. The synergies are about the same. I think it's for Rumble Spark, we're looking for how many elementals and how many elementals are in the deck, as well as how many elemental synergies can also drive it up a little bit. And then it just comes down to the individual card quality. And so I don't know for a fact on the individual cards in those ones, but I do know that I think one of them had a Primordial Slam, a Scorchmane Dragon, and I think a Warbringer Ritual. That all 3 of those, I know all removal has some value because it's useful in a lot of scenarios. And then the Warbringer Ritual, I think also I like for combo potential and had it somewhat rated highly. But I mean, this also goes to the point, Greg, that like each of these decks is unique, right? And it has we price things in a vacuum, right? So we price an individual half deck only looking at a half deck. We look at a couple. That's what the synergies and the combo potential allow it to say, hey, what possible connections does this have to other decks that are doing these combos or competitive archetype type things, but still we're not going to say, oh, if it got paired with this other thing it'd be amazing, right? So we price decks in a vacuum, of which I know for 100% fact that it's not always optimized when you start looking at your collection and what it could pair with, if that makes sense. So I think in this case it was really just, hey, slightly higher card quality according to my ratings, which could be debated, of individual cards.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like we both looked at this, and I think we both agreed. Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we both agreed that the deck that you had at 85, the Captains of Wagering, was a little bit better value, and that had the Warbringer Ritual for that free play potential, so it allows you to combo off more, do more things with it. And you're right, yeah. Like looking at a lot of times when we look at decks, we're looking at what decks could you feasibly pair against it or with it. Whereas when you're looking across the large scale of decks, you can't really do that, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things to keep in mind is, I think I was chatting back with Ryan on one of these things where Ryan was saying, actually, like one of the decks you priced, one of the RSC decks you priced higher, and it's actually I think below one of my other decks that I really, really like. And I got to thinking, and I was like, man, that's really not that uncommon. And I think oftentimes what the biggest factor is, for a Solforge fuse to be effective, you often cannot rely on one synergy, one specific thing. You're looking for things that can make your deck more and more consistent, and the best decks often have a lot of intricate little consistencies where, hey, this random Necrium card paired with this random Tempest card in this deck often end up in this nice little 2-card combo that can be really effective, especially if they're doing XYZ against me. And I think one of the things that's always important to look at when you're looking at a deck is, well, what am I pairing it with, and how effective are all these cards? Because we're rating it in a vacuum, but there's going to be a lot of nuance to the specific pair that you're putting it with. And I think it's not going to be uncommon for you to look at 2 similar decks and just say, I actually think this one's better, and it might be priced below, and that's because it may just be a better fit for the deck you're trying to pair it with.
I do think, one thing that you're kind of mentioning that I love is, it's what I kind of call like localized clusters or small synergy nodes. And we kind of have talked about that on plenty of episodes. When you find these decks that have multiple synergistic nodes or small clusters, even if they don't necessarily pair together with each other in the same half deck, it makes that half deck more versatile, right? Allows it to match in with more things. And in my mind, it inherently is probably a more powerful half deck. So even if you have a deck that let's say it has, this is just an easy example, a Uterran Rex, and you only have 2 dinosaurs. So a lot of people would instantly write off the dinosaur synergy in that. But it does leave open interesting potential that just slides into a deck that has, because its other cards match in well with the other fuse decks so perfectly, and that other fuse deck happens to have 2 dinosaurs, and now you have yourself an entirely different play line when your opponent is able to knock you off that play line. So it's something you kind of just mentioned. I agree, like you having those versatile edges, and it also reminds me of Stefan, aka T-Mine's tool that he created that basically analyzes your deck, shows it in the graph, essentially, and links all of the synergistic cards within itself and shows you the synergies in a circle graph. It just kind of all, circles back to you see all these tools, and, when you have someone, like Stefan creates a tool, the collection manager has a little bit of a tool aspect to it. There's the Netify tool that shows you the stats of your cards, and then there's this tool that you've created, Aaron. They're all highlighting the same facets as strength, so that's kind of neat to see. But sorry, I went off on quite a bit of a tangent there, and really to pull it back to the comparison of this deck, Greg, I agree with, we both agree that we think that this pairing, that the $10 disparity or whatever it is probably all summed up in Warbringer Ritual, because that is just a highly valuable card in and of itself, and it is also innately synergistic with Nova Elementalist Rumblespark playing more spells. So I think these are both very fun decks. This one especially, the Captains of Wagering, I love seeing Burnout and Warbringer Ritual in RC decks. Just the more elementals you can pop on the board, and the stat increases are huge.
Yeah, and so one thing to think about too is in the current program that I have, a card like Warbringer Ritual will will have a base card quality score, and then it will scale based on what it's looking for, right? So let's say Warbringer Ritual has a base card score of 2, and then it will say, hey, also, add 2 times the number of spells you have in the deck, right? So I do what I can to try to scale card quality based on the pieces that are around it, but it's still, again, only with that deck, right? So it doesn't know if you're going to pair this with a Necrium deck with 5 spells or an Aloyan deck with 2 spells. I can't account for that, right? So all I can account for is what's in this package, what can it support amongst itself, and how do you leverage that within its own package. But there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to get more or less value out of a specific deck than what it says it should be good, or what it says its value is in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, and I think if I'm understanding that right, Aaron, basically your tool values versatility. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah,
values universal value.
yeah, I mean it attempts to, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, so there are some cards like a Krogius, right, where I just stamp a high card value on there because it's a win con on its own.
Yep.
It's going to do a lot on its own. It's pretty much always good in a deck. You always want to see Krogius in a deck. It's better in probably sealed than always in constructed. So that card might just have an intrinsic high value, right? But there are some cards, like specifically like the Adept, right? The Adept or the Warbringer Ritual that are, or something like a Soul Reap that get more value the more support they have for what they're trying to do. And it's often cards that say something that says, if you have, X in play, or, scales based on it's looking for something, those cards can, be really, really good. Like a Blight Witch is going to be a lot worse in a deck with only one spell.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I try to count for that in the pricing algorithm.
I gotta say, I love that you bring up Soul Reap. Like, that's probably one of the nearest and dearest cards to our heart, Greg.
We're taking advantage of it very well in the past.
Yeah. Okay, so Eddie, do you want to talk? So this Rumble Spark deck, we just showed two Rumble Spark decks with a $10 disparity, right? Very, very close output from the pricing program, and they're very close decks. I mean, you mentioned they share 6 of the same cards. That's pretty impressive to get decks this close together. Obviously, Sunder Korok differences, but I guess just that moment of we really value, I think, Warbringer Ritual. But I do want to talk about a different set of decks to kind of compare and contrast, if you will. So we had 2 decks that came out of the pricing program, $10 disparity. Now let's talk about 2 decks that came out that are somewhat similar, not the 6-card level, but similar archetype that came out with an $85 disparity, which is a rather large value in Solforge Fusion decks, I would say. Granted, we've seen some decks above $200, I think, in the sale range, and then a lot of lower ones. But $85, pretty big number. So I'm going to break down these 2 decks here really quick, just to kind of give them an overview. The Pilgrims of the Shaving Dance. Now this is a Mantis Forge Seal deck, as can be seen here. Has some life gain synergies here with the Ravager, the Sated on the Reveler, and then the life gain giving cards essentially are Spring Dryad, Stouthide Stegodon, Druid's Chant, Forge Seal, of course, potentially, and then another payoff with Primal Surge. So quite a bit of innate life gain synergy, I would say. It's not the highest I've seen, but it's well above average. And then tied into a Forge Seal Mantis deck, which is good. No DFD, we'll throw that out there. And then the Ghost Scale Barking Soothsayers. So this one is rated at $85 lower than the last one we just saw. And this one, as you can see, it does have a Sated, has a Soothing Mantis, so it gives you life. So a much smaller life gain synergy, which we know, I think, in set 1 was overtuned a little bit, probably acknowledged from the Stoneblade perspective. But this does have some very powerful cards in, like the Bear alone is pretty powerful. And then Taliesin, Transcendent Biologist, Utera Charger, Summoning Council. I would say those 4 alone are standalone, just good cards to have in any Uteran deck we've seen do well. And then, the Forgeborn, the Dark Forge Drain is at cycle 3, not perfect, not what you want to see, but it is still there, provides value. So I kind of gave a general overview. Can you tell us like what your program's really seeing, what it's doing here, and what provides that $85 difference?
Yeah, so in this case, when you look at the 2 decks, and I, if it wasn't clear, I sent these guys my evaluations, my pricing of this, and I sent them the three categories I'm looking at, which is archetype, combo potential, and card quality. And if you look at the first one, the one that's we valued $85 more, is the big difference is that it scored a 70 in archetype, which the other one scored 0 in archetype, and then the combo scored 58, and then the combo on the bottom one scored 50, and then card quality 62 versus 50. So if you look at the combo potential and the card quality, the one that's more expensive is about $10 to $15 more, But where the big difference is an archetype. And so where that's coming from is we have identified, you know, roughly 4, I think, archetypes that are really like can win games, win tournaments. We've seen them, they have results, and one of those is life gain, right? And so this specific deck, the Pilgrims of Shaving Dance, has I think it's 4 life gain producers and 5 life gain payoffs, which is a total of 9, which in our algorithm is currently the highest we have seen. So when we initially looked at this, we actually used Cade's database of around 27,000 decks, and we just looked at the various archetypes and said, hey, what is average? What are the standard deviations? And how far from those standard deviations can you realistically get? And so for life gain, it was like, hey, 5 is good. 6 starts to be like above standard deviation beyond for total life gain and life gain synergies. And 9 actually was the highest we'd seen. And out of the 27,000 decks, only 19 of them had 9 total life gain payoffs and life gain sources. And so what we do in the pricing algorithm is we actually start to scale it up, or, you know, so it basically says, hey, if you're 1 standard deviation above, give it $5. If you're 2 standard deviations beyond, give it $15. If you're 3 standard deviations beyond, give it $30, $40. And then if you're 4, that's like, you know, basically the most tuned you can have for a specific archetype. And we jump it up to like, you know, I think in this case it's $70, saying, wow, you know, this is one of the 19 that are at that, you know, absolutely furthest to the, you know, to the edge. Now, when you get in here, not all life gain cards are equal, right? Like a Spring Dryad's going to create way more life gain triggers than a Soothing. So not all cards are created equal. But that really, in this specific one, is, hey, they're both Forge Seal, they're both Mantis. The card quality is actually pretty similar. The combo potential is pretty similar. And so really the big difference is this one has 9 life gain sources and synergies that, you know, typically we've seen if you pair that with a Necrium deck that's also doing a lot of, that wants a lot of life gain, has a lot of payoffs and sources, then the combination of the two can just be backbreaking for some decks. I mean, if you can generate 100 life over the course of a game and get value out of things like Zraswil and others, though that can just win games on its own, right? So that's the main difference between these two. But I'm curious from your guys' perspective, you know, if you guys see that.
Well, one thing I want to jump in before Greg gets an opportunity is because he'll rub it in and gloat. I assure you, you can lose if you have 100 health or more. I managed to pull that off at an Ultimate Championship. I crested above 100 and then still lost that match. But it's no, it's a good point. It is a win condition all of its own. But I just had to jump in there, Greg, before you got the chance to slam me down. So you go ahead, share your thoughts.
I wasn't even going to bring that up, but what the utilization or the amazement of like actually running this against the massive database that Cade has put together is pretty outstanding. Like being able to use that amount of decks to help build your your logarithm or your scripts, your program is massive. I didn't even think about that, to like run that against there and then look at standard deviations across like some of the things that you're looking at. That's pretty astonishing, you know, when you can do that and being like, look, you know, we've looked at this number of decks and this is a very small percentage that's able to hit that. That kind of blows my mind. I didn't even think about that, but that's fairly readable for you.
And I won't say we did it for everything because it took a lot of time to gather the data and then figure out the standard deviations and then try to assign values to it. We only did it for really what we would consider, and I think I even may have used your guys' video. I can't remember exactly, but I think we're only doing it for life gain, dinos, mages, minions, and maybe, oh man, I should have prepared for this question, but there's only like 5 of them that we're doing it for. So we didn't do it for all the different archetypes, right? Because there could be an optimal beast or zombie, but those really haven't put up results at the tournament level. So that's where we kind of honed our research into.
And one thing I wanted to let you take a stab first, Greg, right? Because this deck is near and dear to me. We kind of talked about how like versatility, like I was saying, how I can think your deck values versatility. This deck to me, look at this thing pairing 17. Like I'll just slot this half deck into anything because it is that good that it melds into almost anything. It is just a very strong standalone half deck that you could slap it next to any other half deck and it's going to perform. Does it want to see life gain in the other half? Absolutely. But it doesn't necessarily have to because it provides enough of it itself, which you kind of mentioned. And then the other thing I wanted to say, and Greg really said it before, with how you used Cade's put together sheet of 27,000 decks or whatever he's at now, is that like we as players and evaluators, I would say, of decks, we have a baseline in our minds, but that baseline can't be as accurate as you running it against 27,000 other decks. So that is really impressive. It's really cool. And to see like this deck is 9 sources of life gain, which is tied for the highest you've seen. That really lets you know where it stands. Whereas me, I look at each individual card, I play the deck, I rate where it kind of goes. So it's just an entirely different perspective. I love the analytics, data-driven perspective that you're using to assign value to these decks.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you're, and you're, this deck is for sale, right, Ryan? It'll go up for sale on the 19th, right?
It will, yes.
Yeah, so, and I think one of the big pieces is it's a multifaceted deck, which really jumps it up, right? I mean, the key is that it has the Forge Seal Mantis, right? Which is a combination that we know, for as long as Stoneblade is allowing set 1 to be played, and as long as they're creating Forgeborns, it will always be able to abuse Forgeborn abilities with that Forge Seal Mantis. That combo alone is not very common to find, and it will forever be able to abuse the other Forgeborn that it's paired with. It does have its own, which you can, gauge on how often it can be abused, but it always has the potential to abuse other Forgeborns. We have the Blighted Forgeborns coming out, right? If there's potential for those to be abused, this is a great deck. And then not only that, it also has the ability to just outscale, out life gain, whatever it's against. So I just think no matter what, right, this deck is going to be an instant purchase into a very strong deck, not only for now, but for the future of Solforge and how the game develops, right? So that's why, in my opinion, this deck I think may have been the highest price deck out of all the decks that we ran through. I can't remember now, and obviously you guys may have tinkered since then, but that would be my commentary on the comparison between the two. Not that the other deck is bad by any means, but it just has the Forge Seal Mantis combination. It doesn't have the sheer life gain potential that one does, and it's a combination of the two that I think is what really puts it over the edge for me.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point. Is it's I don't know if I want to use future proof, but it's well set up to provide value to the future, and both of these half decks really are. The one thing I will say about the Ghost Scale Barking Soothsayers here, which I think is going to be priced a little less than the other deck, but that's kind of really the fun of the secondary market, is finding the value point at which you wish to enter, and then the half deck, if it has the tools you're looking for, right? Like this one has Utera Charger, which if you ask me, and this is saying something, is in the top 5 Uteran cards of set 1. And we know Utera has some broken cards in set 1. But Utera Charger, it can be absolutely dominant, especially depending on the deck archetype you put it in. So this one just has some really fun stuff. And Greg, I'm pretty sure you've used every variant of a bear in this game to kill me. So I'm probably one of those players that has scar tissue from bears. This isn't at least a camouflage one, but I'm pretty sure you've killed me with a sated bear in the past.
I love my camouflage bear, yeah.
And maybe we'll get to this, Greg. I think you have another deck down the road, but one of the main archetypes that I really struggled valuing, because I haven't got to play it a lot, was Darkforge Drain potential. How important for it to be at 2? How important is the spell package? How important is what you're pairing it with? And so that's another one. And I think I don't know if we're gonna. I think we had something on the docket, and I don't know if we want to jump to that. But the what you're pairing these decks with, right? Especially the one with Darkforge Drain at 3. That's something that I think there's room for improvement in the current algorithm. Is that specific combination? What specifically you're looking for? What does the green half need to have? How do you value a good green half for DFD versus a purple or the Necrium half, right? And which one is harder to find? The combination of the pieces in the exact order they need to be in. All that I think goes into how we value decks, and so that's one that I was excited to talk to you guys today because I don't think I've heard really you guys break it down, and as far as valuing, hey, which side's worth more, which side's harder to find.
So with that, I think the DFD is harder to find. I mean, you have to have DFD at 2, which means you have to have an Auro spec, and you have to have Mantis and Forge Seal in there, right? And we've seen maybe I know of 4 decks that have that. Out of everything we've seen
those
so
3
far.
components, nothing else considered. That's DFD at 2, Mantis, and Forge Seal.
Yeah,
that's those 3 constraints.
Yeah, if you're looking at just those, and then you also have to have other things in that deck to make it, good too, right? And whereas with Necrium, and this kind of goes into like some of the things that we notice, like me and Ryan value more, I think, the Necrium spell package, which leads into kind of that DFD, like what do you want for it? And so there's a handful of decks that I could pair into that DFD deck that I have, right? And then I think you rated the DFD deck fairly accurate. I don't think I adjusted the sales price on that of what you had it for. I think it was fairly accurate. The Necrium side, though, I think is where we start looking at things like free spell plays or impactful spell plays, right? So you can play a spell to help your DFD, but if it's not impacting the current board state, and it's just helping you in the future, it's not as good as a spell that's going to impact the board state now and help you in the future, right? So like Cersei's Call can help plug up lanes or chalk up lanes, right? Put out multiple bodies. Disian Siphon is still allowing you to play multiple cards, upgrading, you're getting immediate impact off of it. Extras Will, if you got the life gain package, right? And that's the other thing with, like, if you're looking on the green side, switching back to that, you kind of want some life gain in there potentially as well to help keep you alive and allow you to use your health as a resource more effectively. Because it's really about either having breakthrough or having stealth or controlling the board. And part of that is just willing to take damage, right? So I don't need to block all your damage. I just need to set up a scenario where I can get 1 DFD damage through. And so if I can take damage here and fill up the other lanes, you can't block them all. And then when I'm off forwards, it gives me an opportunity to just smack you for 30 hit points or 25 hit points. And that's usually enough to finish the game if you're nickeling and diming them with the Necrium spell package like that you have access to. Soul Reap, we've kind of talked about as well. Just kind of like utilizing those things for it, right? And so there are a lot of different ways you could use the DFD. Me and Ryan have talked about pairing DFD into Aloyan. I think Coral right now is running a pretty fun combination of a Forge Seal Mantis DFD on 2, pairing that with Aloyan and using the Aloyan spell package that allows you to upgrade cards because you're putting 2 into your banish pile. When you do it, you can play your spell and then upgrade another spell to get that flowing. So you're getting more options out of that.
Yeah, and so I think when you start talking about how do you price a DFD deck, right? Then I think it comes into, okay, well, number one is DFD competitive in the meta, right? Which is depending on who you talk to at any given day. I think there's some people who are high on it, probably some others that are a little lower on it. As far as its consistency, how often it can win, how quickly it can win compared to some of the other things that are going on, right? So I think that's factor number one. How often can the DFD compete in the current meta at the top level, right? If the answer is, hey, it can be S tier, it can be at the top, then okay, we're probably looking at $150 to 200 decks in the current market for what that deck would be worth as a whole, right? Maybe a little more for what somebody's willing to pay to compete at the highest level in the game of Solforge right now, which is probably a whole nother topic as far as what the high and low potential of a deck in general is. But let's just say it's $200 to $250. So then you have to think, okay, well, you know, how much of that goes into the green half and how much of that goes into the other half, whether it's a Loyan or Necrium. And I think, you know, we had discussed that, hey, I think you had said, hey, Aaron, wow, I'm actually quite surprised to see how low the Necrium packages are that I think you have a gold deck, right? I don't know if it's in the sale here. I don't want to presume one way or the other. But you had said, hey, this deck just seems low, right? For how good it is. It's a gold deck. It performed really well at these tournaments. It's the second half of the DFD. And I think the question becomes, okay, well then if the deck's 200-ish, you know, for a top tier meta deck, maybe a little more, 250, how much should be assigned to the green deck versus how much should be assigned to the other deck? And, you know, it probably just comes down to supply and demand at that point as far as how hard they are to find on their own. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's where there's a lot of nuance to that, and I don't have the answers. I've just made estimates, and that's what came out in the report that I sent you guys.
I think that makes sense, and if I can jump in here now, this is the problem you've stated over and over again is you have to value the half decks at themselves, right? But to jump to a couple of like questions you posed is, you know, is DFD regularly competitive at the top tier? I don't think Greg will disagree, but maybe he will. On average, no, it's not. I've played many variations of DFD decks. On average, I think they crest into the upper A. Or even mid A, but the beauty of Solforge Fusion is those decks that are absolute aberrations, right? And Greg's green half is one of those. It does all of the things that you want a DFD deck to do. And so when I mentally rate a DFD deck, I'm looking at a Fuse deck, so that's part of the problem. But I do, you know, it has to have at least, you know, two of the following things, right? It has to have breakthrough, it has to have stealth, it has to have multiple body producing cards, and it has to have two of those three. It you know, is kind of a requirement. And then it should have at least four capability of doing those things. So it should have, you know, at least 2 stealth, at least 2 breakthrough, or at least, you know, 3 multiple producing bodies and 1 breakthrough. I kind of go off of the magic number of if I got 4, I see 25% of my cards in a given hand, I'm going to see at least one of those opportunities in a given hand. You know, that provides you consistency. And then after that, you need free spells. You need the ability to play more than your 2 actions per turn. And the more cards you have that, the higher the value goes up, right? And that's where Greg's really goes up is having Zerath's Will, having Primal Surge, having Dizzian, which allows you to play additional cards, all of those mechanisms. And then you get into, all right, now I've met the very hard to meet DFD archetype of Mantis, Forge Seal, DFD at 2. I've met the stealth, breakthrough, multiple bodies requirement. I've met the free spells requirement. Now I also have to meet the other competitive requirements, i.e. I've got to have removal, you know, those types of things. I have to have an above average stat line creature, at least 1. You kind of have to go through like all the check boxes of what do I need to be a competitive deck. And that's where you find, you know, that's why I say DFD isn't regularly an S tier deck. It's just because it can't regularly meet those criteria. And that's where I think Greg's is the absolute aberration. And it's mostly on the green side of his, but the purple side also meets a lot of those requirements. So it's difficult, and I don't know where you draw the line. But I think, you know, it just depends on... I don't know if I would agree that 250 would be the limit of competing at the top tier. Like, in my opinion, I think a top 4 Worlds deck should probably be somewhere in the $400 range. Just from my estimation of looking at the decks we've seen. Not saying all of them in there were, but the half decks are pretty impressive on each side of the table. Like if you look at Sam's, the World Championship winning deck, very impressive on both sides of the table.
But as a counter argument, and just to spar with you for a bit, Ryan, the purple deck that I forget the name of it. It's the oozes, right, Greg?
Mm-hmm. Uses a flag and mowing.
Yeah, to spar with you just a little bit, I'm curious, like, how good is that deck if you don't have Greg's Abomination green deck? And it's a genuine question, because I think on the one hand, I could be missing some of the Necreum just sheer value in certain combinations, spell packages, etc., which could just be built out as a combo potential that I don't have built out today. But the other question is, like, I think it has a couple stealth creatures in there that aren't that great. Like, typically just aren't good creatures. I don't want them in my deck. They're dead cards in most decks. And I feel like if the answer is DFD isn't super competitive, and you don't have Greg's green deck, then how much value is there really going to be in having that deck that really it does that one thing really well, but doesn't actually pair with a lot of other things, right? And so that's where I think it comes down to. There's a very different discussion when you're looking to buy a single deck versus a paired deck or a fused deck. So anyways, I guess that's all I was trying to say. I think on the one hand, I think I maybe am undervaluing some Necreum combos, especially some of the spell packages. But on the other hand, I am genuinely curious on your guys' opinion on just like, if you don't have access to a Greg Green deck, what is the potential of that deck? Is it just slot into anything, or does it slot into something very specific?
Yeah, what I'm very curious to hear, and this kind of goes back to the baseline that you're able to create with the spreadsheet of 27,000 decks, is how many Necreums have not even Cersei's Call, and Greg might slap me for that one, but like has the 4 life gain cards, has the Virix, the Soul Reap, the Zarath's Will, and Dizzy Siphon. Because that's one of the things that I'll be honest, that's one of the things I filter for when a new Grey Vikings game sale comes out, is I look for those 4 spells. And then I couldn't imagine a more powerful spell being slapped on top as the 5th one in Cersei's Call. And that's what I think Greg's half deck provides. And that's not even getting into the removal and destruction synergies that his creatures provide.
And is that just for DFD, Ryan, or is that just in general? You think that half deck has tremendous utility and can be put with anything, and it's going to always perform?
So because of set 1's life gain overtune on the Uteran side, that those 4 spells are always going to perform, I believe.
Yeah, I think with this the purple deck, specifically some of the oozes of Plaguing and Mowing, you compare that with Uterra, like I said, those life gain payoff decks perform really well. You're pretty much always getting Soul Reap effective because it has, I think, 4 beasts in it. And then when you're looking at just the spell package alone, anytime you compare it into a red spell slinging deck, you may not need the, Commanding Demon or the Ixian Dreadmaw, but you could probably always use the Brood Fang and the Scourge Hydra, on top of being able to have those more impactful spells that are on there for the red side. Because again, you're only generally playing this, in this purple deck, I'm usually playing quite a bit more than I normally would. But even with a red spell deck, you can utilize the chaining creatures or your anti-elementalist to start using the suite of spells that you have in the purple side. And I think that's really for any purple deck. This may be jumping up ahead a little bit when we talk about undervalued decks. I would say this is one of those undervalued decks, but we also have something we were going to talk about would be the People of Ire and Ignoring.
Before we jump over to that, Greg, I appreciate that segue, but I do want to throw one thing, because I did just pull up, it took me a little bit of time, sorry, for viewers, uses of Plague and Mowing. To stress its versatility, I didn't know you have this paired into 17 decks, Greg, which I think stresses its versatility, and I personally just think it's that life gain package. Like, that deck we talked about, the Pilgrims of Shaving and Dance with the 9 life gain and synergy, you slap this thing next to it, and that's a go-getter, right? It's gonna roll through quite a few decks. So sorry.
There's one other thing there too, that Ryan, that I think can't be, and I've talked with you, I think, about this offline, which is just like, at the end of the day, when you're pricing decks, if you're pricing your own collection and you have not a massive collection and you've played a lot of the decks, I mean, I think trusting your gut too is a big thing when pricing decks, right? Like, Greg, if you've paired this 17 times, you've seen it has incredible utility, you've had success with it at the highest level, there are a bunch of little synergies in it that me pulling it up and have never played it can't see, right? I think you do ultimately need to trust your gut, and having played it and had success with it is probably going to get it right over the algorithm all day, right? So I just think that's, I mean, to just like kind of sell your point of, you know, how much this deck has had success and your experience with it, I think likely just means, man, yeah, there probably is something about this specific deck that is just incredibly strong, that just doesn't always meet the eye and doesn't hit the like general algorithm pieces to make it priced where you would want it to be.
Yeah, and you know, and I agree, but I'm glad that the kind of the segue we ended up on kind of got us here, because I think this is a really really apt point, you know, just for newer players, like things to look for, discussions to hear, you know. So kind of glad we got here, a little off where we intended to go, but very good discussion, and hopefully, you know, some players find some value out of that, or some of the viewers find some value out of that discussion. So sorry to have interrupted you, Greg. I wanted to throw that last piece in there. You were going to jump onto
yeah, we were just in a good similar conversation around this deck, and which is very similar to the conversation on like the People of Iron ignoring, kind of it's a similar spell package, but to your point, Ryan, it does miss the fourth spell in that, but instead of Cersei's Call, it has Infernal Ritual, which can be a game ender, right? So you're making a slight adjustment on those. So again, here's one that I think might be a little undervalued normally, because I think it has a lot of utility in this deck as well. And again, Necrium's not necessarily like, they have some very powerful creatures, but they tend to be more powerful support creatures, right? And you're not going to have this necessarily in this deck. You have the Banshee in there, which is good, but Grimgaunt Predator is useful in some cases. Existing Dread Maul useful in some cases, right? You can make this work in some decks. This would be another deck that would work similar with the DFD deck. Not maybe quite as strong, but it does give you a different avenue. Instead of having Cersei's Call, which is very impactful, you have Infernal Ritual for creating that off-forge aggressive play.
And just to be clear, Greg, this was one where the algorithm spit out a price and you thought, oh man, that's actually, you know, I don't know if I'd be happy letting this go at that price, right?
Yeah, I mean, this one I actually bought on your last sale to use to potentially use. I mean, if it doesn't sell, I'm gonna.
So you thought I undervalued it. Is that right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think so. One of the things that looking at it, I mean, I can just look at it and see, right? There's like we discussed, I don't have a lot of combos checking for the Necrium spell package. Clearly, you and Ryan have had a lot of success with that, and I think you guys as players either lean into that or just like that play style. So, you know, it's gonna provide more value. The only other thing I'd say, just looking at it, is like seeing a lot of the blue cards on here, or the common cards, right? The other thing is just how difficult is this to put together, right? And I know there's some other folks in the community have done a ton of work saying, hey, look, if I want 5 specific cards together, you know, that's actually really, really uncommon. It's like, you know, 8,000 decks or something that you have to open up. So I think, you know, this is one where it just might be, hey, look, the algorithm didn't see, and it's also not, I don't think it knows what this would go with, and I haven't built it as like, hey, this is actually the shell of an archetype that often goes with DFD or some other pairing that you're looking at. But I can definitely see why you guys like this one, and I can definitely see hey, look, the algorithm may be slightly missing some of these really powerful Necrium combinations of spells.
And again, you brought it up, you know, like, again, we look at it, you know, I'm looking at like fuse potential, right? And the algorithm's not doing that. I'm also looking for something specific that I enjoy as a play style, right? So I may value it more, right? So, it's just.
I'd love to see it. You know, I would love to see you pick it up off me and, you know, identify the value. I think it's, I mean, it goes to the fact that these decks are like, I think I talked about this with you, Ryan. They're like little mini pieces of real estate, right? Like they're all unique. They all have their own attributes, and obviously the game is marketed in that they cannot be repeated, right? Nobody can have the exact same deck as you. And so I just think it's really interesting, Greg, for you to be like a home buyer coming in and say, oh yeah, love a fireplace. Oh, really need a fenced in backyard. Those are like must haves for me and what I like playing, and the decks, that I know I can leverage well. And I think this is a great example of that, where you're walking in just being like, oh yeah, this checks off the boxes that I want out of a deck. And I think there's the algorithm, may get to a point where it could be tuned enough to do that as far as what's intrinsically valuable. But I think in a lot of ways, right, it's going to be like the Zillow listing to some degree, where it's like, look, there's going to be some people out here that just value this deck for whatever reason, the name of the deck, the specific cards, a specific combination. And I don't think the algorithm will ever get that right.
One thing I'll to wrap this deck up is I'll just throw out is Infernal Ritual is like the poor man's Krogius, and I don't say that in jest. So for newer players, if you haven't had a chance to really get Infernal Ritual online, this is a deck that will sneak wins out left and right, or there's a card that will sneak wins out left and right. So just something to keep an eye on. And I only say this because this is a card that I initially undervalued myself. Infernal Ritual, and then after playing it a couple times, never feel like it's a bad idea to play that level 1 Infernal Ritual, because at level 2 it starts paying huge dividends, and at level 3 it will absolutely end games. So throw that plug out there, and then we'll move into, since we kind of jumped on I love the real estate analogy, and so we're gonna go into my preferred upgrader home, what maybe wasn't quite the starter, but after I dabbled my toes in Solforge Fusion a little bit, I said, hey, I want to do something, and it's very specific, and it's Uterran minions. So we talked about this is never going to be an S tier deck, at least in the current iteration, until some things change drastically in sets, vice versa, or however it's going to work. But it can be a very, very solid deck, can crest into the A tier, and it is what I was out there looking to do. But I also think you kind of talked about how when you want 5 certain cards, it becomes, I like to use the term aberration, like it's very hard to find. And so this is one that kind of came out of the pricing program rated at $17. I really went back and forth through a lot on my head on this, and I said in my head I would buy this for $45, and I wouldn't, and I would sell it for $45. That's where I put the value. So we kind of have a $28 disparity. I fully admit that I have a little bit of personal bias in this one, but it does have the DFT at 2, which is interesting, but that's not what this deck is for. The thing that caught this for me was Transcendent Biologist, Lycian Rain, Summoning Council. I could ask for more. I would love to see a Shroudthorn Splicer. I would love to see Dendrify, right? But those 3 cards I have found give you a level of versatility to pair into a lot of other cards, or a lot of other half decks, to become very, very fun while still maintaining an acceptable level of power, to where it could beat S tier decks on the right draw. Obviously you have to have a lot of things go your way. So this is one that I valued higher than the pricing program.
Yep. And I think this is so I will say that we do look at minions, and I'm guessing the $17 was generated based on the minion concentration. You'd have to go back and look at the notes that I had in there, but that's my guess. And I would say that essentially, like, what the algorithm is doing is saying, oh, okay, like, yes, this is a high minion concentration, but we've not seen the minion archetype, winning tournaments at the highest level, or even at the weekly level. Doesn't mean they'll never be great, but doesn't mean, like, I just haven't seen it. Maybe some Thunder Crash style decks, some combo style, but I haven't seen anyone pull it off yet. And so I think in the algorithm's mind, the algorithm says, okay, then if it's not winning at the top level and we haven't seen really the archetype in general, we probably slap like hey, there's like a $50 cap on this archetype as far as how, and then from there, we kind of work backwards and say, okay, let's look at card quality, let's look at the combinations, etc. And this is what this one spit out. And so I think that's where That's where probably it comes from. Now, does it mean it's not fun? Does it mean, no, it doesn't mean any of that. Does it mean it's not an aberration for minions? Probably not, right? It means it could be doing one of the best minion packages in the game, but I kind of put a soft cap on, hey, if minions isn't, collectible, winning tournaments, etc., then it's hard to drive value there in general. Although I will say, before I pass it back over to you, Ryan, I will say I've had a tremendous amount of success on the ladder recently with Aloyan and Utera and double rallying and tons of bodies, and actually a lot more success than I expected. So I do think that there are some packages that can use this, to be maybe more competitive than meets the eye.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the double rallying. So I'll let you jump into this, Greg, but I just got to throw out the Mad Lab plug as well. I think as more Mad Labs get open, the Utera replacement synergy minion producers become more valuable.
I was gonna say the double rallying is fun and it works well in this. I have a double rallying deck and I have a green deck I paired it with, but it's the wrong green deck for it because while it can generate minions, it doesn't have access to breakthrough or stealth, and that just kills me in the end. Not being able to break through.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, I've actually been testing it with some others in the community. I actually think green, blue, double rallying can be quite strong, specifically with certain pieces. I think Mantis being able to trigger some of the double gizmos multiple times, and then if you have an Apocalypser in there, but I typically like the builds that have mystical, that are creatures with mystical that can spit out things, but also do something. Like I've got a deck that it's got a mystical Batterhide and a mystical Polymorpher. And so not only are you generating two bodies, but you're also dealing with threats at the same time, and you drop down the rallying, and you've turned off their threats, then it starts to get, you start to be able to interact with their board and also build an overwhelming board yourself. So anyways, sorry, I probably got long-winded on this one.
Sorry, we're getting... I love playing the double rallying deck, so I'm sorry if I...
No, dude, as soon as you said I like the mystical creatures, in my head I went Batterhide, Polymorpher, started triggering, and then third behind that's Druid is a lot of fun. So Batterhide and Polymorpher.
Mystical Mantis is Christmas Land.
Yeah. You showed on Mauler and the camouflage in this one. I need to fix mine.
You just said the Mystical Mantis. I used to have a deck with Mystical Mantis, and it was Nova. Not a lot of people play Nova Forgeborns, but it had the +2/+2. Give all your creatures +2/+2. And so generally, even if I had only one other creature on the board, you drop the Mantis, you flip it, and then you flip it again. You got 3 creatures with +4/+4. That was a lot of fun. So Mystical Mantis is entertaining.
Mystical Mantis can, especially with the double gizmo, it can put 4 bodies out. So a turn 1 Mystical Mantis with a rallying creature on one of the gizmos can be difficult to even come back from.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can only imagine. Okay, so we talked about some decks at the pricing program we thought undervalued, right, through our opinions. Now we're going to jump over to a couple we thought were overvalued, and kind of just give our reasonings why. And for those out there, like in the sale, these are ones that we're saying we're valuing less, so we're going to price less than what the current secondary market says. So keep your eyes out if you're interested in these decks, of course. And then the other, I should have wrapped this up before, sorry, is one thing Aaron said is that this is pricing for the competitive level of play, which is great. Like I agree, that's where we need to price things. But if you're a player that's looking out there for zany archetypes or fun stuff, like that's where you can find value in the secondary market if the secondary market's value is based off competitive play. So also kind of keep that in mind. Like if you you're just kind of out there looking for fun stuff, but you don't want to spend a lot of money, the Grey Vikings game sales are an amazing opportunity for you to find the thing you're looking for at probably a reasonable price.
And the other thing I would say is, just because we may think something's overvalued, we're also coming it from a different viewpoint on selling decks. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's jump into the one that you selected here, Greg, to highlight. It is the Artist of Solar Sitting Tyrants.
Yeah, and so this one here, I think Your program listed this out at $110. I think I've dropped it down to 75. And again, it's not necessarily a cosm of where it should go or where I think it'll go. For me, it's just here you see it has the unstable, right? I think the large part of this value is coming from, it's got good cards. It's got good cards in it. It has a Betrayer Mantis. We all know Mantis is one of the big bad problem cards in the current environment. So you're going to get value off of that. So somebody looking for a Betrayer Mantis, they're harder to find. So it has value in there. It has good cards in it. Ice Storm, Thundersoar, Stampeding Master, right? It does a lot of the little things in there. It's got a little bit of the dinosaurs, got a little bit of mages, but not a lot, right? So you'd have to find a very good pairing for this to work well, or you're going to basically utilize that Betrayer Mantis, right? And so for me, it's more of, want somebody to find a good home for it. Like, I don't have a use for it, and so so the valuation is based maybe differently than what the program would do it.
Yep. Yeah, I think you summed it up well there. I think one of the things we didn't talk about is just oddities. As we have done sales for a year, we've sold, we're getting close to 1,000 decks that we've sold, but people like oddities. And from the data that we've looked at, set 1 alpha Kickstarter betrayers are way harder to find than set 2. I think last I looked, it was almost 2 to 1. So the cards that are only in set 1 and may only ever be in set 1, the betrayers are very, very hard to find. And Mantis obviously being one of the marquee cards in set 1. I think the Betrayer Mantis is an oddity on its own. I think there are people that are just like it for that. And just giving you access to Mantis in a different color that can pair a different color type, potentially abuse either something now or something in the future. The only way to get double Mantis is by having a Betrayer. So I think, in general, I just slapped kind of a high value to Betrayer Mantis in general. And I think, to your point, right, the deck may be good, may not be good. It may never find a partner and may never be competitive. And so I think these are some of those things that are just incredibly difficult to put a value on.
Mm-hmm.
One question I did have, because this is we talked about those small, like, micro synergies. I hope Thundersoar and Thunderstomper comes with like an automatic $5 increase. When these two best friends go together, like $5. $5, you got me.
Doing
at least.
There are a few like that, and you can probably see them. I'm slowly building them out. So like I know like Spring Dryad plus Kindred, Spring Dryad plus Glowhive. There are a couple handful, and as I find them, as I play against them, I'm like, man, that's really annoying. There's a lot of value. I slowly add them in. I have to go look. I don't think I have Thundersoar, Thunderstomper in there now. I think I do have Thundersoar and Stampeding Mangasaur.
Yes. Yeah, that's the better pairing.
You're putting $5 on this. You got to put Mangasaur on 5.
Yeah, that is the better pairing. But
and I can't remember. I think I had what's the Rain of Flames? I forget the name of the card, but the one that does 4 damage to everything. I think I had that with Thundersoar, like $2. I love Thundersoar. Thundersoar is so cool and it's so fun to play, and there's so many interesting little combinations with it. But ultimately, I think you have to be careful adding too much, because it's like a lot of times it's like, well, is there an archetype that wants to be doing that? And is there a deck that can cost enough to justify it? So anyways,
yeah,
I think talk about
you talk about Thundersoar. You're talking to the guy who spent probably 3 months trying to tune a Thundersoar based deck. How can I make Thundersoar a problem? And I think I succeeded. It's close to a problem. It's never going to consistently beat S tier decks, but it has on regular occasion. But it takes very specific decks, and it's Thundersoar's a blast. Super excited for Tremorsaur in set 3. I think that thing is going to be a problem. Even it's going to dwarf Thundersoar, I believe, but we'll see how it comes out. So let's jump over to some decks that we think potentially were overvalued. So we're kind of going to flip the script here. Oh, that one was, sorry. So I'm just gonna jump to the one that I kind of threw down here. And Aaron, you and I have actually talked quite a bit about this, the double shambling conundrum. And so
Yep.
I think that Necrim life gain for Necrim life gain's sake isn't necessarily good. I should take that back. Isn't necessarily great. It is good. Double shambling can be very difficult to deal with. One thing this deck has absolutely going for it is an oddity, kind of like you mentioned. It does have a Betrayer Rex that is shambling, which is a very interesting setup. But so to go into this deck coming out of the pricing program was at a solid $97, and so I personally, and I've played this. I have this fused into some decks. I don't know why this says pairing 0, but I've slapped this into the digital client already. Played some matches, and I think I value this closer down to the $50 range. And that's probably because I'm not actually valuing the oddity. I loved hearing that, and like having you on, you talking through all these little bits that add or change values. Yeah, it's like, oh, I didn't even think of that, because I don't value oddities for oddity's sake. I simply look at it as a mechanism to making a strong pairing.
Yep, and I think that's exactly the case here. I think, but it's the two things happening, right? That jumped it to 97. Double shambling, I think, can be hard for B+ tiers. So, like, if you're out there and you want to just like win on the ladder consistently, I think jumping into a double shambling deck, grabbing any double shambling deck, is going to already vault you up. They're pretty consistent. They do their thing, and there are some decks that just can't beat double shambling. They can't break through. They can't get through, and you just drain them to death. Right, so I think double shambling, but there's more and more of them out there now. So I agree with you. I think double shambling on its own, I think the algorithm probably is over tuning a little bit. There's more out there. There's a lot more to choose from, and they're actually not that hard to find because it's both a modifier and a base creature. So they're actually not that hard to find. But I think the combination of it being with the Rex here, not the fact that it's a shambling Rex, but just the fact that it's a double shambling deck, but also has a Rex. Rex is a Dino Lord. People like to build dinos. It's a fun archetype. They're actually, I can't remember if is Rex only set 1.
Yes.
I can't remember. So if it is, they're really hard to find. Like Rex, in the WRECKS. In fact, I've never opened a REX. That one is even more exciting. I think that one's actually quite a bit more expensive because they're hard to find. But anyway, I think they're slightly better in the Dino comp.
Yeah.
But it's a Necrium deck with 2 dinos. I don't know how often you can even find that. I don't know if it's even possible outside of a Betrayer.
I think
only Betrayer.
Yeah, I think Drake's the only one.
So I think the fact that it rolled the Drake, which I think allowed it to be able to roll a Rex, because I think you can't really get. I don't know what number card this is. I don't know if you have the physical deck, Ryan, and you know if this is a number 1 card and likely the only one that exists. Would not be surprised with the double rare Forge and modifier. So I just think it's an absolute modifier. I think the algorithm picked up on that and said, hey, shambling Rex, let's add value there. Let's add value because it's double shambling, and what it ended up spitting out is $97. I think in your mind you're saying, hey, $97, you gotta be packing heat if you're gonna pay $100 for a deck. And I think you're absolutely right. This deck it may never be competitive. Right, at the A or S tier level, but I think those two things going for it is what the algorithm picked up on, and you have to find the right buyer to pay $97 for it. I think it absolutely is worth it because you cannot find this deck easily. You probably would have to open, I don't know, you probably could never find a deck that is like this, right? So if you have somebody who wants that, it's a real estate thing. If you have somebody that wants that, right, they will pay $200, $300 for this deck, right? But if nobody ever wants this, then it'll sit unsold at $30, right? Or $40, $50. I think double shambling, it should go around, 40-ish, 50-ish for sure, if somebody wants to jump into the competitive scene. So that's my take on this one.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, like I said, like when I look at it, a half deck is a mechanism to making a competitive pairing or a winning deck, generally speaking. I do have plenty that I play for fun. But yeah, when I look at value, that's generally strictly what I look at for the most part. And so you bring up a great point. And then the other thing I want to say is I did just grab this deck. You asked. It is number 1. It's the number 1 shambling Rex out there. Had it sitting right over here. So
there we go. I think it's a fun deck, and I think the right person could have a lot of fun with the deck.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Shambling works. I've been enjoying playing. It's not a double shambling deck, but I've enjoyed playing shambling into some like kind of off meta stuff. You know, Ator, right? Getting it onto the Cloud Rift
Oh,
and getting it the triggers.
100%.
Like,
100%. It is not just. I actually think there are like the face burn archetype, right, Greg? Which I think is basically what Ator is. Shambling does that. Shambling can slot into Rumble Spark. Shambling can slot into the life gain archetype. Like, I think double shambling, it has sold well for us. We've sold, I think, like 7 or 8 double shamblers and 1 triple shambler, and they've just sold really well. And I think it's because they have a lot of utility in what they can do in the competitive archetype.
Yeah,
Are they going to be the best? Probably not.
I love how you mentioned RSC. So my purple half that I paired in my RSC deck, it's on for sale here. Everyone's going to get to take a look at that one if they want. But it's a DHS double shambling with some of the spells. It's a lot of fun. Shambling, and one of them is a shambling Drake. Having mobility on a shambler, I think is phenomenal. And then being able to move it in and out of the energy at will, like kind of what you're saying. Shambling works really well with RSC.
Yeah, I think it just has a lot of utility. It has a lot of utility, and the double shambling alone, it doesn't take much to find a deck that can utilize the triggers, whether you're doing A-Tor, whether you're doing RC, whether you're doing life gain, to build a deck that can compete with A-tier decks. And I think it's one of the easiest ways to just jump right in, and will slot with something you have in your collection. So hope to see these go, especially if you guys discounted them. It's a great opportunity for anybody listening to the podcast or the show here to just jump in and play competitively on the ladder with the open beta.
So I think we're past the point. We're not going to cut off. We can still go back and talk about decks, but I'm going to stop showing decks here. Unfortunately for your viewers, you get to look at us again here as we kind of start to get close to winding down this episode. This has been some absolutely phenomenal conversation. Like getting to open the hood, Aaron, and just hear all the little pieces of information that you have to share. Like you look at it, and it makes sense, from a business perspective, but you look at it from every angle, for every viewpoint to get the things. And when we're talking about it, we have our siloed viewpoints from just, I would say, the competitive play experience pretty much solely. Obviously some other aspects, but yeah, it just been phenomenal to hear all the little pieces of information. You talk about making a baseline from 27,000 decks for certain archetypes, how you value, you kind of get things from a 3-score system with the archetype, the combo potential, the card value, just talking about the oddities, how there's players that value oddities. You mentioned Thunder Crash, maybe could be in there, be out there. Like, just you saying that starts my head thinking like, hey, I have a Furious Shardback deck that's got a Thunder Crash field with a lot of elemental spawning things. Like, it's just been really refreshing conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on and appreciate what you do for the community and running the secondary market, because you've given me access to decks I would never have access to. And I've heard that from so many other players that it's like, I second place world championship player Mandangu has equivocally stated that he just basically buys all of his decks through secondary market because he doesn't want to invest in the amount of monetary value it would take to purchase those decks in bulk.
Yeah, we've opened a lot of decks, and I, firsthand know, I think we're over 4,000 that we've opened, and firsthand know how hard it is to pull specific things. So I definitely can understand that. And honestly, I really appreciated coming on here and hearing your guys' take from your perspective, right? Because you guys have played at some of the highest level in Solforge. You guys have been successful. You guys have your own kind of take on what you're looking for, how to be competitive, etc. And, I've learned a lot from you guys just here in this conversation of just how you're looking, what your vantage point is. And I think it just goes to show how versatile these decks can be and how difficult it can be to price it. And I think, I think it's a blast to anytime anybody drops a collection of decks that they're selling, it's a blast to look through them. If you guys do end up pricing every individual one and launch that on the 19th, it'll be a blast to just watch it. I just think the sales are really fun to just watch and see what happens, who picked up what, what went quickly, what didn't go quickly, and just watch it unfold because it's something unique to Solforge, right? This experience that you get to have is unique to Solforge, and watching these decks sell, because most other games have, you know, the generic staples that sell well, the commons and commons that don't sell well. So being able to be a part of these sales is just a lot of fun, and it'll be exciting to see somebody else running something similar.
Yeah, I want to second kind of what Ryan said and what you said as well. Another thing, like, I want to thank again you for coming on and going through this process with us. It's been awesome just seeing behind the scenes and your take on it, and you know, your analytics behind it. It's really interesting to me seeing that. It's kind of some stuff I do in my daily life. And then also, like, second, you know, like watching your sales, kind of what you said, like seeing who's buying what. Like, that's the only thing I'm doing. Like, oh, okay, Nathis is buying this deck. What does this deck do? Manugu's buying this deck. What does this deck do? Hellkite's buying this. And just following that along during the sale is just entertaining as well, and just kind of getting a perspective of what's out there and what people value is just, it's a fun part of the community. As you said, you don't really have that in any other game. So
it's kind of like partaking in the NFL draft. Like, not quite at that level, but I honestly get the same feelings. You get to see who picks what, and then there's direct messages going on behind the scenes. Oh, nice pickup! Like, that's a really cool deck. I wish I had saw that. You know, I remember I had picked up that Betrayer Leyline Vermin. It was a deck out of a GVG sale, and 4 messages within like 30 seconds. Oh my goodness! I was just looking at that. I was about to click it. 3 other people. I wish I had seen that first. So it's just a really fun experience.
Yeah, and it's unique to this game, right? Like, there's only one of those decks, right? And so it's unique about Solforge. It's one of the most exciting parts about the game, and one about the most fun parts when engaging the secondary market, I think.
Well, for our viewers out there, like, how can they, you know, reach out to get product from you, or do you have any plans in the future that you're planning on doing? Looking forward to another GVG sale, like I said. I like buying them. So
we have a lot of product that is packed up. So we have to crack packs, get them run through the pricer, putting together, as you guys know, putting together the sale files is not a trivial task. It takes time to compile it all, review it all, make sure there's no errors, etc. So we run sales maybe once a month or so. We'll probably plan to do one a week or two after the open beta start. Probably a week or two after you guys run yours. I'll probably gather some data from that, especially since you guys used some of my prices. And it's just always interesting to see what's going for how the meta is evolving. Especially, it's rapidly evolving now with the open beta. I expect, because there's a lot more games being played now than there were on TTS. So the meta can evolve and is able to evolve if there's room for it to grow. So from that perspective, we'll be around running sales. Nothing significant from our side. We're still just going to kind of run through the Discord channel using the same model. We are working with a online developer to potentially launch some way to evaluate your decks through the browser. If we can figure out all the Stoneblade API calls and whatnot, it'll be just a simple system where you enter your username, select a deck, and then get a rough estimate of card quality, combo potential, some other stuff, just straight in the browser. So if we can get that figured out, then that may be something we launch here in the next month or so that's using the back-end engine that we've developed to price the decks. So that would be cool if we can get that working.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is kind of going on the flip side of that, Aaron, is that, I know there could be some concerns of people potentially shoveling their decks, but it actually brought to light one of the decks that I have that I hadn't really looked at before. I was like, well, why is this scored so high? And I was like, oh, well, I could use this to pair into these things. And Ryan, it brought to your attention another deck to relook at again that you thought maybe wasn't as good as you were, and then you've actually paired it and started playing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I have a Furious Shardback deck. So you can never say it's a bad deck, right? The Furious Shardback instantly elevates a deck to a very high level. It just has the ability to do pretty disturbing things. And so the deck was rated pretty highly, and I thought, that might be a little bit too high, because I look at the deck and I see there is good stuff. I'm not going to say there's not good stuff, but I don't necessarily see that level of value. But Aaron, you'd kind of mentioned, Hey, have you tried looking at the like card value score and just just trying to take a deck that fits kind of something you're looking for, throwing it into another thing? I'm not gonna lie to you. I took your thought process there to an extreme. I filtered two highest card value decks I own, slapped them together. Didn't care about the archetype. Um, but what it was one of my Furious Shardback decks was the second highest value. The other one was a Shambling Shambler, which are two very very powerful individual cards. And so that Furious Shardback, I ended up finding out that I was playing more of the Tempest cards than I expected. Right when I had played it before, think I had paired it into other things that were generally carrying more of it, and then just using it for the Furious Shardback. Right now in this pairing, I started realizing, okay, well it's got the Mystical Teacher, it's got Thundercrash Field, it's got Warbringer Ritual, it's got Burnout. I think it's got Lightning Tamer. That's a pretty nasty elemental build. And that Mystical Teacher at level 2 and the Shardback being another mechanism to white boards, it provides, we talk about this all the time in competitive level decks, having a safety net or redundancies built in, that's its own redundancy in like board white removal. You have the Furious Shardback, and then you have this Teacher with that many elemental producing cards is kind of removal on a stick. If you play the Mystical Teacher, they don't remove it instantly. I'm generally playing at a minimum one, if not two elementals right next to it, and just start taking creatures off the board. Ended up being very strong, and God, you had me looking at it. I was like, maybe I should price this Furious Shardback deck a little higher. Like, this is super fun to play.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, and why I think a tool for, so to your point, Greg, saying, hey, yes, you could stymie creativity, but you can also generate creativity, and I think that's where like a lot of people would have I think newer players, how are they going to find Furious Shardback unless they've watched some of your content, right? Or been around the Discord? Like, how does a new player find Furious Shardback? It's 1 out of 30,000 cards, right? So the ability to kind of sift some of these to the top, right, quickly for them to be able to see that, I think would help them in maybe generating deck ideas, etc.
And one thing that made this is such a great point. Like, how would you just find that? So, I think I was one of not a claim to fame or anything, but one of the first players to stumble into the Protective Alamancer. Right, it came out of the first booster I bought. So I didn't have a lot of choices in decks I was going to play. I bought a booster, got 4 half decks, and I looked online. I said, oh, there's an event across the Twin Cities in Minnesota that's already got 5 players signed up. Like, I'm going, and I have these 4 decks to choose from. So I just kind of by happenstance slapped the Protective Alamancer on the table and was like, didn't think it would be that great. And then, whoa, look at what this thing can do. And I think what we're going to find with these like digital decks and this battle pass is people are going to accumulate decks much faster than that experience I had where I only had 1 booster, went and played. So you're 100% right. Your tool is going to give people access to find those outlier cards that they, oh, maybe I should try this.
Yeah, I just think it's very difficult, right? I mean, you've got outwards of I don't know what it is now, 30,000 individual unique cards in the game, and which some of them are much stronger than others. And so I think hopefully it would allow people to just quickly scan through some of their collection, sift them to the top, and generate the creativity, while hopefully not stymieing, Greg, the $17 deck that actually, when paired with something else, creates a masterpiece, right? And how do we do both, right? That's I think the tough question to answer.
Yeah, and I think as players become more involved in the game, right, they'll learn to look back at those. So I think the tool will be really good to help people get into the game, get efficient, effective decks that allow them to compete well. And then as they get more invested in the game, you just kind of intuitively learn, or you start going through and looking back at some of the things like, oh, I can do this. Let me go look through my decks and start looking through the deck manager to kind of like sift through more. So what kind of, what me and Ryan had done, and kind of Ryan had brought this up, is that like distinguished players in the community that have been here for a while, that know how to use the manager, right? They're going to go through and filter how they want. They're going to search what they're looking for. They're going to sift on spells or free or breakthrough or whatever that they're looking for. But newer players aren't going to know how to manage that very well. So Ryan had the idea of putting a remarks on there that kind of gives an idea for newer players what one of our decks can do. to kind of help with that. Like, this is a very good Necroom spell package, or this is a very good Dino base, or a good elemental spell package, or free mage synergies. Which, as people evolve with the game, they won't need to use those so much, similar to what your card scores would do. They'll start using the more advanced, like more analytical tools to dig into themselves what they're looking for. So I don't know if I'd be as worried about the negative aspect. I think it's much more positive.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, we are in the works of building it now. I will let you guys know if we can end up solving the API issues, or at least lack of documentation that we've run into so far. But yeah, that's the plan, is to have some basic way to kind of throw in your collection name, sift through some of the decks, and then do the same thing that we did for you guys, kind of give some documentation on, hey, this scored well because of this, right? Because I actually, as running the sales, gotten a lot of questions of like, hey, can you tell me why this is $80? I don't see it, right? And then I go look at the deck and I gotta, okay, it's oddity, here's the card, or whatever. And actually, if you guys remember the day that they were asked, I put out that I was trying to evaluate collections. Some of the ones I sent back were, Ryan, to your point, with like the Rex, the shambling Rex, where they're like, what? This deck's garbage. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, yeah, technically it's a pricing evaluator, not necessarily a, strength evaluator, right? So there's definitely a difference as far as strength of a deck and its value versus some oddities, right? That are just fun, unique things that could be exciting.
One thing I do want to throw out to the viewers, if you could, in the comments below, what I would love to hear, and I assume Aaron would love to hear, because we were kind of talking outside of this episode of like, us doing the Forgeborn Finishing School is a passion project. It's something we enjoy doing. We love doing it. That's our incentive, is kind of the community bonding that we get from it as well. And Aaron mentioned what he's doing. It is very much a passion project too. Like there's a lot of passion behind it. Gets a lot of enjoyment out of it. And so if you could, in the comments below, if you've participated in a Grey Vikings game sale before, please share like that gem you found or that moment you had in the NFL draft analogy we were kind of talking about before. Like just those really amazing moments that his business he has been able to bring to the community. I think that'd be really fun to share. And then, if you haven't taken part in a Grey Viking game sale before, like feel free to, share a comment, something you learned from this video or something you're looking forward to, or what is that deck maybe you're out there looking to find. Just kind of start that conversation, because these are the types of things I love hearing. I shared the example of me finding that 5 Dinosaur Tempest deck in Rex with the Rex. If you've played against me in the list, there's like a 40% chance that's the deck I'm playing online in the digital client. So just take a moment if you can and share some of those moments so that we can all get a little bit of enjoyment out of that. And then I do want to say, this is now, I think, easily the longest episode we've ever run, Aaron, and that's and that's absolutely amazing, because the conversations that we've had, this has just been so enlightening for me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, likewise. I enjoyed it just as much, and really appreciate the conversation. Really appreciate what you guys do, the content you guys put out week in, week out. I hope your guys' sale is successful. I hope the shambling Rex deck doesn't get too low, because I might get tempted myself to jump in there and grab that one if you price it, where you say that you priced it at. So anyways, I look forward to watching your guys' sale, look forward to your guys' future videos, and really appreciate what you guys do for the community.
All right, with that, I think I think we're gonna wrap it up here. But this has been a lot of fun. Honestly, we'll leave the invitation open. Aaron, you want to come back on? Honestly, at any time, reach out. This has been awesome. I think this has been an amazing tool for the community. I fully suspect that I'm gonna get quite a few messages from some people who've really enjoyed the things that you've had to share with the community. So. Thank you very much, and I think with that we'll go ahead and end it here for the day. Thanks everyone for attending.
Bye.
Thanks for attending this lesson of the Forgeborn Finishing School. If you like this video, please subscribe, comment, or consider donating to our Patreon account. We look forward to our next lesson.